So welcome to another fantastic Faena Rose event. There's only one, Malcolm Gladwell. Give us a little sneak peek about what we're going to talk about.
There's a little sneak peek on a podcast I've been working on for my Revisionist History podcast coming out this spring. And it's all about the problem of fat tails, which is...
Fat tails.
I'll let that be the mystery.
I love it. As we like to say, get ready, strap in for another fantastic Faena Rose event. Put your hands together and welcome the one and only Malcolm Gladwell.
Thank you, Pablo. So the tradition here is that I give you a preview of something that I'm working on. And so what I thought I would do this evening is give you a preview of a episode of a podcast that of my podcast Revisionist History that will come out this spring. And it's all about what is referred to as the theory of fat tails. There's a very simple way you can use to think about social problems. One is to understand them as systemic problems. So many large cities over the last couple of years, decades or so, have gone to their most consistently underachieving schools, the schools that are considered the worst in their school system, and decided that the best way to fix that school is not just to bring in a new principal, not to give the school additional resources, not to get rid of some teachers and bring in better teachers, but just to shut down the whole school. Shut it down, take the kids, disperse them throughout the system, take the teachers, disperse them all kinds of places, right? And what we found when that happens with really underachieving schools is that the kids do a lot better when you just shut down the school and send them somewhere else. In other words, the problem of a school underachieving was a systemic problem. It wasn't a problem you could solve by replacing one or two different individuals or fixing up this or that. The problem was that the entire culture of the institution was in some way deeply dysfunctional and pathological. And the only real course available to reforming it was shutting it down and starting over somewhere else, right? That is a systemic problem. But not all problems fit that pattern. So there are a whole set of problems that look very different when you analyze them. Let me give you an example. In New York City, over the last couple of years, they put up 2,500 automated cameras at stoplights. And in last year, in 2023, those automated cameras gave out a total of 7 million speeding tickets. Okay, so we have this beautiful database of speeding in New York City. Now, what do you find out when you look at that data? Does that data tell you that New York City has a systemic problem with speeding drivers? Actually, no. If you were to make a graph out of all of those 7 million tickets, what you would discover is that they are not evenly distinguished across the million or 2 million drivers of New York. The overwhelming majority of people who get caught for speeding only get caught for speeding once or twice, right? But there are a very small number of people at the very edge of the distribution who got caught 1 million times. Like, there are 186 drivers in New York City who got more than 100 tickets in 2023, right? The term that police use for these 186 drivers are super speeders. And the super speeders are the people who end up killing pedestrians at crosswalks. They're the ones who are causing all the problems. They're the ones who terrify you when you're crossing the street with your kids. Most of us, when we get a speeding ticket, we get the hint, right? We slow down the next time. These guys don't do that. When they looked at these 186, they realized that they had, on average, each one of those 186 people had $11,000 in unpaid speeding tickets, right? Which tells you something about the ticket collection capabilities of New York City. If you were to make a graph out of all of those 7 million tickets in New York City, what the graph would look like is you'd have a very, 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 very long line hovering just above the horizontal axis, right? That would go on and stretch on for as long as the eye could see. And then when finally you got to the end, the graph would go like this. right? It would have what economists call a fat tail. Speeding in New York is a fat tail problem. I am obsessed with fat tail problems. I like to collect them. I'm a student of them. If you have one in your life, please share it with me. I have one in the book that you all got, The Revenge of the Tipping Point. There's an example of one of my favorite fat tail problems, which is COVID. COVID was totally fat tail. We thought when we were in the middle of COVID, I think I talked about this last year, we thought when we were in the middle of COVID that all of us, if we were infected, bore an roughly equal risk of infecting someone else. That is so not true. Completely, as it turns out, false. If everyone in this room right now had COVID, and what are there, 300 people in this room? Probably 280 of you bore basically a minimal to infinitesimal risk of passing on your virus to someone else. But 20 of you probably were emitting virus at a rate 50 to 100 times greater than everybody else. COVID is spread by super spreaders, a very small very small percentage of the population who, for reasons we don't understand, when they get infected with a virus, they just produce it in unbelievable amounts. When you have an outbreak of COVID in any group, it's because there happens to be a super spreader in the group, right? That is a classic fat tail problem. I could go on, but the lesson of New York's super speeders and COVID super spreaders is that before you set out to solve a problem, you have to know what kind of problem you're solving. Are you solving a systemic problem? Is this underperforming high schools where you just shut them down, the whole thing, and start over? Or is this a fat tail problem where the solution to solving the problem is just to target a very, very small group of people who are responsible for an overwhelming part of the damage? Thank you all very much. Invite me back next year.
With that said, Malcolm, I want to thank you so much for coming.